Stacey. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I apologize for the delay. I had some technical
I was
issues with my phone.
I was
Um,
wondering.
yeah, I was like, and I was all prepared, I promised, but then there was a last minute technical glitch.
Yep.
But here we are, and I'm so happy to have you with me on this live with Seline session. So let's get right into it. So let's start out by talking about what are archetypes?
Yeah, so the easiest way to answer that question is just to give you some examples right away. It's an archetype is something that's universal. I'll say it that much. But examples of human archetypes, which is what we're talking about today, are mother, child, father, king, queen, fool, jokester, these kind of things like that. Yeah, but the origin of the word actually comes from the Greek word arche, which means original, and typos, which means template. So it's the original template. So the idea is you should be able to take an archetype like mother and go anywhere on the planet and translate it into the native language of a person you're speaking to. And when you say that word to them, they will understand what you're talking about. They'll have a whole picture. They'll have a whole idea. And that idea of that kind of person, of what a mother is like, will be universal. The patterns, there'll be universal patterns in that you will find anywhere, any culture that you go to. And that's why it's archetypal or universal. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people realize that they have been exposed to archetypes since they were kids. You know, we see them in fictional stories, we see them in movies, we have the hero, we have the heroine, we have the villain, the jester. So it's not something they haven't been exposed to. It's just that I don't think they had the languaging for it.
Yeah, and it's kind of so obvious and so right in front of us that people tend to kind of miss it. It's one of those, the brilliance is in the simplicity of it, but once you really start getting into the patterns of the archetypes, you learn so much about human behavior. It really is the roadmap to human behavior and and the human nature. Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to mention about archetypes is that there are both the light and shadow attributes of all of them. So none of them are inherently bad or good. I think people really need to understand that, especially when you have an archetype that seems negative, you know, for instance, a vampire or something like that.
Yes, yeah. So there are archetypes that what I call stereotype, that we kind of see only in a certain light because that's the box we've put them in, like vampire or like the fool. A lot of people are really lean away from the fool or kind of not wanting to be labeled a fool, or the bully. But to move out of the stereotype, move out of the label of that box, we now need to look at them in both the light and the shadow. So every archetype has both gifted, helpful, beneficial aspects or patterns, and also ones that are malicious and harmful and negative to work with. And it's not and it's not just two sides. There's a whole spectrum. There's a gray area in between as well. Or you could see it as vertical, as like down at the bottom is the shadow, or in the basement is the shadow, and higher up in a building, for example, you're going to get higher and higher into the light aspects and the gifts of the archetype.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how many archetypes are there? I mean, there are hundreds, right? Like
yes.
there are...
Yes. So that's a good question. I mean, really, we could probably get up to thousands. I have a working list right now, and it's over 300. The big thing is there's kind of like tarot cards. There's a major arcana and a minor arcana of archetypes. So in the major arcana of archetypes, there's no more than 100, probably around 80 or 90. And then when we get into more detailed, like, for example, with the fool, we have the comedian, we have the jester, we have all of these kind of subsets or sub-archetypes. Archetypes to them. And so once you get that major arcana of 80 or 90 archetypes figured out, and then any additional ones you learn, you just figure out which major archetype they fit into, and then you can understand it pretty quickly.
Okay. So just to make this more digestible and tangible for people, should we get into some examples of people, famous figures, who personify certain archetypes.
Yes, exactly. Yep, that's so I already mentioned the mother, and that one you could look at anybody you know who's a mom, right?
And card here.
Yep.
Mother.
and you could look at anybody you know who's a mom and see the mother archetype in them. But in terms of famous ones, we have Mother Mary, the mother of Jesus. That's
everyone knows her.
Yep. Most people do. Yep. And if you don't know her, you might know Maya Devi, who is Siddhartha or Buddha's mother. We've also got the Queen Mother, right? We talk about Queen Elizabeth and call her the Queen Mother. Mother Teresa is another figure. And then kind of a fun one from pop culture, not too recent of pop culture, but still pretty famous movie, The Sound of Music. Maria von Trapp is actually really grows into the mother archetype in that movie. You know, she's not the birth mom of those children, but she becomes a mother figure for them over the course of the movie. Yeah.
She's also got a bit of the nun archetype, doesn't she? Or
well, she tries to fit in. That's another interesting point. She tries to fit into the nun archetype at the beginning, right? She's in the convent and it doesn't go well for her. She's got too much child energy in her, and she doesn't actually fit the archetype of the nun. So that's an interesting piece too. There's archetypes that we naturally fit into and express and that are just part of who we are. And that's why this work is really powerful, because it helps us learn who we are. And then there's archetypes we try to fit ourselves into. And I bet a lot of people have had that experience of trying to fit into a box that really doesn't work for you. So, yeah.
Okay. So it's by understanding these archetypal patterns, we can become true to ourselves. We can become, our true selves, basically.
Yes, exactly. So the big thing with this work is figuring out first which archetypes you are by nature, you were born with, and that you're traveling through this lifetime with. And then from there are archetypes that we work with in the present moment. And there are actually some that we pick up and we try to embody, we work to embody. Like for me, I don't have the entrepreneur as one of mine in my natal chart, and in terms of the one that travels with me for my life. But I'm starting my own business. I really befriended the entrepreneur. I found people that were really good and strong in the entrepreneur archetype, and I started modeling them and kind of looking at how their patterns work so that I could step into that archetype, at least in the present day. Yeah. So other examples.
You have to work at it, basically.
Yes, exactly. And I do think you can work yourself into some, but some just, you can't, like they just don't, it's just too much against your nature and it doesn't work.
Too much against,
Yeah. So some other examples in terms of, to give you everybody concrete examples, we've got the liberator is one we're going to talk about kind of over the course of this conversation today. And there's the card right there. The primary example of that is Nelson Mandela. Like that's the easiest one, or Gandhi. That's another really easy one to go to.
Yeah.
And Martin Luther King Jr. It's hard not to think of like, okay, like all of those liberators are not with us anymore. So who would be alive today? And, one of my best examples I've been working with recently is Malala Yousafzai, and how she's working for education and all the great work that she's
and liberating the women in her culture.
Correct. And really, she's gone worldwide. She's really interested in all women having access to education. So Yep. But it is very much a movement to help liberate women. Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay,
and so what about the artist? You want to talk about
the artist? Yeah, everyone knows the artist.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the artist, I think a lot of people, initially think of painting, like the picture on that card there. And that is true. You can be a painter, you can be a writer, you can draw, a photographer. Music is another one as well. But artistry really has to do with beauty and with creating. So taking a concept of beauty that is somewhere out there in the collective and bringing it into form. So some really good artists that we know are Michael Jackson. And then historically, we've got Picasso, Van Gogh, Monet, those great painters are really well known. And another interesting way to look at the artists is George Lucas, who made all of the Star Wars movies because he had the artistry of having that vision and bringing that into form. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Okay. And should we go for one more for
Sure.
people to?
Yeah. Yep. There's the Magician is another one, and that's really popular today with the Harry Potter movies. And we've also got Merlin, the wizard, Houdini. You know, these are the famous magicians out there. Yeah.
But what would make the magician different from, say, is there an archetype for someone who manifests things? Would that be, I don't know, the Midas or
Yep, that would be a good idea. Yeah, so the Midas miser is one that we kind of have as a dual archetype that we work with. And the Midas is like King Midas, who everything he touches turns to gold. So but he's not creating things out of thin air. The magician is the one who seems to create things out of thin air, you know, and ultimately the energy has to come from somewhere. Anybody who reads sci-fi or fantasy books knows, you know, in the magician's training that they have to figure out, do they store the energy up in a stone and then use the energy in the stone to create the spell, or do they draw energy from the land, or do they make a magic potion and get the energy from that? So the energy comes from somewhere, but what is kind of the magic trick that makes it seem like it comes out of nowhere. So in terms of manifesting, I think the magician is a good one to consider. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right. Those are some great examples, Stacey. So should we start talking about the archetypal wheel?
Yes, we should.
And how and why is it important?
And where did it come from?
Yeah, where did it come from?
Yeah, so Carolyn Myss, anybody who's familiar with her work, her last name is spelled M-Y-S-S, but pronounced Mace. And she's
check her work out. She's amazing.
Yeah. She's written a number of New York Times bestsellers, is still very prominent in the field, and has been in this field for decades. She's really, really been at the beginning of a lot of the great kind of consciousness movement that's going on these days. And she wrote a book around 2000, I think it was published in 2001, called Sacred Contracts. She essentially had a vision in regards to archetypes. Archetypes did not begin with Carolyn. They actually began with Carl Jung. He coined them. He's, a lot of people probably are familiar with him as a psychologist.
Yeah, a psychologist, right?
Psychologist. And he coined the term archetypes and defined what they were back then. But the idea of archetypes actually goes all the way back to Plato. Plato didn't call them archetypes then, he called them forms, but his ideal forms were essentially archetypes. So this idea has been around for it's universal or archetypal, it's been around for a long time. So Carolyn knew about Carl Jung's work, and she was also familiar with astrology, and she had kind of a revelation or vision about how to work with these archetypes in a way that is revealing about your life purpose, about your contract, what you came to do here in this lifetime. And so what she has done is taken the astrological wheel that has the 12 houses in it. And then what each of the clients does, or each of the people do who are working with this, is they discern what their unique 12 archetypes are for their lifetime, like I've already talked about, and then they cast those blindly, so not using the left brain, but using the kind of a divine hand in the work into that 12 house.
Unconscious.
Yeah. And so then you have that 12 house wheel, and already have all the wisdom of the houses described in astrology. So that's already laid out for us. And then what we do is we blend what we know about the archetypes with what the qualities of the house that they land in, to help us know on a deeper level, because archetypes, each archetype in and of itself is a huge world in its own. Like essentially, if you took one archetype and wrapped it around the earth 10 times like a banquet table, and sat down at one seat, you would think that you knew everything there was to know about the archetype, but someone sitting 200 miles away is going to have a completely different idea of the same archetype, because even though there are universal patterns, there's different expressions and there's different emphases on those patterns. So the archetypal wheel really helps you get specific about how the archetype expresses in you and in your life specifically. Yeah.
Okay, and So just to give everyone an idea what it looks like, I have my own archetypal wheel right here. I don't know if you can see it with the glare,
Yeah.
but there is an archetype that corresponds to each house. Stacey, it might be worth mentioning about about natal charts, astrological natal charts, because yeah,
Yeah, so
because
the
this,
difference between an archetypal chart and an astrological chart, is that what you're thinking?
yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah,
there's quite a difference. So an astrological chart, you send an astrologer or you get a program and you type in your birth date, your birth time, and
yeah,
where you were born, and then it spits out information based on where all the planets and stars lie in the heavens. And so that's already predetermined and requires someone who is skilled in astrology to read, because there are so many layers to it. You have to understand the planets, you have to understand the signs, you have to understand aspects like oppositions and trines and conjunctions and squares. It's quite complex.
yeah.
There's a lot of
It's a lot.
information there, but
It's a
it's
lot.
very complex.
Yeah.
So the thing about the archetypal wheel is it's much more, it's accessible for anybody. And that's what's really great about it. You don't need a program. You don't need an expert. You just need to know a little bit of, read the book Sacred Contracts, learn a little bit about it, and then cast the wheel yourself. And then you can go through and start to gain insight on how this works. And once you know a little bit about just the houses is all you have to learn, and then the archetypes. So it's much simpler and more accessible for a lot of people. I think that's the brilliance of it.
And knowing what each house means,
yes.
right?
Yeah. So the houses have very simple main themes to them, and so that's where you begin. Like the first house is your identity, and it's about who am I? So you begin there. And then as you delve in, you find there's even more aspects to them. So it's really, once you have that initial natal chart cast, you have a lifetime's worth of inquiry in there. You could just work with that single chart for the rest of your life. And the fun thing is once you really get into the work with Sacred Contracts, there's other charts you can cast as well, but they're all really based on this initial one that you do. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's a great tool for self-reflection, self-discovery. And it's important for people to understand that this is a process and it's not a one-time thing.
Yeah.
It took me a few months to really sink my teeth into my chart and really, Stacey gave me a lot of journaling exercises to really think about what each archetype means to me and how the patterns played out over the course of my life. So yeah, it's something that you can use throughout your life. It's not a one-time.
Yeah, and I tell people the more they put into it initially in terms of the investigation and work that they do before they cast the chart, the more they're going to get out of it once it's cast. I know people that are kind of quick, like, oh, these 12 are mine, let's cast it. And
I was a bit impatient now because astrology spoils you, right? Because you can get
you want to know the answers really
fast. Oh my gosh.
I'm that way with those self-help quizzes in the magazines. I'm like, I want to know what I am.
Yeah.
But the good news is, so I want to make this accessible to kind of people at all levels. It's like, yes, there's this natal chart and it can take a couple, you can spend a couple of months working on it and get everything together for it. But also just knowing even a few of your archetypes is going to make a difference. So it's accessible kind of at all levels. And we're just showing you the potential of where it can go. But even just figuring out on a couple of your archetypes will help you know yourself a lot better and be able to co-create with your life rather than have the archetype in the shadow run you on autopilot. Yeah.
Yeah, because that does happen a lot, right?
Yes. That's the problem. Until you know which archetypes you have, you are running on autopilot and then you're in trouble.
Yeah, and being aware of what the light aspect and what the dark aspect looks like and how it could manifest in your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the hedonist.
Yep.
Hedonist.
Yeah.
Hedonist, for instance. That could actually does have a light side.
It does,
right?
It does. Yeah. I actually know someone who has this archetype and does massage, and she's a massage therapist, and she does it in a way where every client, she has just the certain sheets that she knows they'll like, and the patterns and certain scents. And so she makes this really luxurious environment, and really nourishing and luxurious environment for her clients. So and you know, it's to be able to enjoy life. Is that not what this is about? And so actually, you know, there is some argument for the fact that Jesus was a bit of a hedonist, because how many times did he say, let's sit down to eat, you know, let's have a conversation, but let's eat, you know, he liked to eat with everybody. That's a very hedonistic way of being, actually, and in the light, because let's sit down and break bread and enjoy our time together.
Right. Okay.
Great. So should we take a look at your chart? I think we covered.
Let's do that. So we can get an idea of what a chart reading would be like. Of course, we're just scratching the surface here. We're just giving you a sample. And we're just going to talk about a couple of my archetypes. I'm the guinea pig for this session. So,
granted, I've done this for you before, so you know what you're in for.
But sharing it with the rest of the world.
That's a little different.
It's a little different. So this is my chart. I don't know how you can see it, if you can see it. So we're going to be talking about just a couple of them.
So we're going to start with the third house, I think. It's
the third house. The third house, I've got the magical child, and that's the card.
And these cards that Seline, that you're showing everybody, these are from a card deck that Carolyn Mace made. You know, people ask me. I highly recommend. Go ahead.
I highly recommend you get it. If you want to delve deeper into all of this.
There's a wonderful little booklet that comes with it, and and it gives you some good keynotes for each archetype. So it's a really good starting point.
It simplifies everything. So the magical child.
So this said, everybody has the child archetype. So Seline is not special here in having a child archetype in her chart. Every person on the planet has a child archetype, but there's different types of child archetypes, as you're showing here.
I got them all here.
The orphan, the nature, the eternal, the divine, and there's one more. And magical, and wounded. Thank you. So these are the 6 main expressions of the child archetype. So essentially, part of this work is, okay, I have the child archetype. Which one am I? And that can be pretty tricky to figure out, but you get there. So you landed with the magical child, and the third house. Let's talk about that. So the third house has to do with communication and the mind. So it's communication and thinking. And so here with the magical child, already we know the magical child has a great imagination. So she's in the realm of fantasy. The magical child really has a wild imagination. And so in this third house, she could really perceive, that's part of the third house is how you perceive things. She can really perceive the world as a magical place, as a fantastical place, and that can help her be very optimistic. So this is in the light. The magical child, in a conversation with somebody who's a magical child, she's going to be very optimistic, help you be an imaginative, help you see kind of the possibilities in a situation. And there's, on the flip side of that, with the shadow of the magical child, there's pessimism, where she might think that the mundane world, mundane conversations, things that have to do with reason and the left brain are kind of boring. And she might check out and daydream and be in her own fantasy world and be kind of pessimistic with anything that has to do with logic and reason, because the third house is very logical and reasonable. And this is when we see the archetype in the house, we can see that as possibly a problem, right? Like you have this very right brain, imaginative archetype in a house that's very left brain, logical. That it could be a problem, or it could be an asset, in that the two complement each other, and she's able to work from both the right brain and the left brain. So she's able to think like a child in the shadow can be very innocent or naive, But with that third house added in, she may be able to think her way through things and be more mature in that way. And that she's not naive or gullible because she has her mind, her left brain on her side. So that actually, you know, is how the house can actually help complement the archetype in the house. Yeah. Any other thoughts, Seline, listening to that?
Oh no, I mean that's totally true. That's right. I as I told you during our sessions, I completely identify with the magical child. Hence my love for Disney. And but yeah, it's something I had to really work at, really getting out of the whole naivety and the whole world being this.
Yeah, the rose-colored glasses. Yeah,
the rose-colored. I had to work at that
the magical child definitely has those.
Many times I was disillusioned. Because I had such an idealistic view of the world. But yeah, so I was able to work through that.
Yeah.
And
do you mind if I add one more piece? Just to add in about the writing work you do. And that, so words, and the third house is really about words and the words you use. So the magical child here is going to help you write in a way or communicate in a way that is that uses words to get people enthusiastic about things, to catch people's attention, and, you know, play a little magic trick on them, like see the world magically or through the rose-colored glasses like you do. So be more optimistic. So there's a tie in there to do what you do for work. Yeah,
that's definitely what I try to do. And I think this is a good time to touch on the survivor archetypes.
Yeah.
Because child is one of the survivor archetypes, and we have 4 of them.
Yes.
Right? So you just want to briefly go over that.
Yeah. So this is the part, you know, everybody gets excited when they hear, oh, I get 12 archetypes that are all mine. And then there's 4 that are already predetermined, that every person on the planet already has.
We all share those.
Yeah. So we all share them. We all have them. That's the good news. The bad news is that they can seem a little unsavory just based on the names, and people get a little discouraged when they hear about them. But just remember, they all have a light side, and so I'll give you that.
They have a light side.
Yeah. So the first one is the victim. You know, a lot of people don't want to be a victim, all of that. Let me tell you, the victim in the light side is your guardian of self-esteem. This is also the aspect of you that brings compassion, kindness, respect. So if you are really focused on kindness, compassion, respect in your life, that means you're working with the victim in the light. Also, the victim in the light is very good with boundaries. So something you need for your survival, survival. That's why it's a survivor archetype. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where that whole victim mentality can come from, right?
Correct. Yeah. So we're familiar with the shadow. I always like to talk about the light, because once I say the word, everybody knows what I'm talking about with the shadow. Yeah. But I need to remind you, you've worked, like all of us have worked really hard to set good boundaries, to have good self-esteem, to feel good about ourselves. And to be kind, not harm others, because the victim in the shadow also victimizes others. She can victimize herself through shame or guilt or self-criticism or judgment, but she can also in the light, or she can also victimize others. So in the light, it's all about not harming others. It's all about being kind and respectful and compassionate to others, which is something we're all working towards. So we're all working with the victim in the light, and we need that. Yeah.
Okay.
Next one.
And the next one, which one?
Let's do the prostitute next, and then we'll.
Oh, the prostitute, guys! It's not what you think it is.
Yeah, so this one gets confusing at first, because initially
we're not talking about working girls. Yeah. Oh, we could. I mean, that is one way that it could.
Yeah, that's one way it literally expresses, and that's the other thing when we're working with.
Prostitute is a lot more than giving body.
Yeah, when we're working with archetypes, it's another thing to remember is there's the literal representation, which is the streetwalker, the gal who sells her body for money, and then there is the symbolic representation, is how we sell ourselves out. To get people to like us, you know. So my authentic self might be to be more introverted, or to not speak up in a conversation, but because I want other people, you know, maybe my boss is watching and she wants me to be more extroverted to make a sale, so I'm going to sell myself out and pretend to be somebody I'm not, so that I can get my boss to like me and hopefully someday get a raise. So that's actually money tied directly to selling out.
I think money.
Yeah.
A lot of people prostitute for money.
Yes.
You know,
in their jobs and, you know, to get a higher pay.
Relationships.
Yes.
You know,
and in relationships.
Women who marry for money.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also women who marry for someone, just to have someone who loves them, to have someone who, when they don't have enough self esteem or self-love. So it can be just about wanting people to love you or accept you or like you. So it's when you're trying to get something in return, you're giving a part of yourself away to get something in return from somebody else. There's an exchange.
So it's like that transaction, but it's not a healthy transaction.
Correct. That's the shadow, right? So let's remember the light of the prostitute.
The light.
And the light is she's the guardian of faith in the light. And at faith, Faith. And this means it also has to do with integrity. So that word integrity means to be congruent, to walk your talk, and to put your money where your mouth is. These kind of phrases are the prostitute in the light, is to say, this is who I am and I live by that. These are my values. The prostitute in the light knows what your values are, helps you know what your values are and live your life by those values. And that's so important for your survival. Because if you sell out on those values, you can get into trouble very quickly. Yeah.
Okay, the last survival archetype is the Saboteur.
Saboteur. Most people are very familiar with this one and kind of glob onto this one pretty fast, because a lot of people know what it's like to procrastinate, to deliberate too long on decisions and miss good chances to get stuck and not create enough change in their life, you know, these kind of things. It's important to remember with the Saboteur in the light that this is your guardian of choice. This is where you can have the potential to make empowering choices. And so the empowerment is a big key word in regards to the Saboteur. It's what are you giving your power to? So in the light, you are empowering your soul at the highest expression. So this is where you give the authority to your soul and you say, okay, what do I do? What choice do I make here? And this is also the agent of change in your life. So any time in your life when you've made a decision to really make positive change in your life and you've taken that leap, that is very much the Saboteur archetype. Yeah. Change and choice and empowerment are the three keywords for that one. Yeah.
Perfect. So just to recap, there are 4 survivor archetypes that we all share. So in your chart, 4 of your archetypes are going to be
those.
Are going to consist of these. And the other 8 ones are unique to you and your
whatever combination you have. Yeah.
These are the 4. Okay. I know it's a lot of information, guys, but
so there is.
You're gonna have time to.
So
we'll give you resources if you're interested. We'll give you resources at the end that you can like study and look into if you're interested in learning more.
I'll just put a bookmark here because I think it's important to note that since you already have these 4 archetypes, you can already jump in and learn more about yourself. But I have classes on each of these survivor archetypes, extensive 3 to 4 hour long classes, and with lots of resources. So those, really help. That's a good starting point if you're not sure what archetypes you have in addition to those 4. Yeah.
Sure. Should we look at 1 or 2 more of my archetypes?
Yeah, let's look at least another one. Yeah.
Which one do you want to do? Do you want to do the Seeker? We've already done the Liberator. We've touched on that. So
you can look at the Seeker then in the 4th house. Yeah. Yep. So the Seeker, this one is an interesting combination again in the house because when we think about the Seeker, this is somebody who's wandering. Another way to describe it is the nomad or the wanderer. And this can be an intellectual nomad or wanderer, like, wandering between different schools of thought or ideas, or this can actually be moving from place to place. Now, placing this in the 4th house for you, the 4th house is actually about your physical home. The 4 walls that surround you. And it's also about your sense of safety and comfort in the world. It's a very introverted house. there's the element of water is here. So it's very emotional. It's very much about the emotions, and it's very much about your interior life. So we have this archetype that is often kind of stereotyped as one that is out there, going out there, wandering about, doing things, in a house that is very kind of stationary, that is very closed in. Yeah, it's very anchored. That's a good way of describing it too. So to put those two together, it seems like, wow, that could be troublesome, but also it could be helpful in that it helps you. The seeker can help you kind of push your comfort zone, because the fourth house is very much about, where you're comfortable. And if you had the hermit in the fourth house, you would definitely spend way too much time in that comfort zone and maybe not push yourself out of that comfort zone into change very much, or into
I felt that. I think a lot of us have felt that way this year.
Yes. Yeah. That we're all being forced to stay home. Yep. Yeah. So there is this opportunity here with the seeker to learn too that you don't have to actually physically, literally be out there learning new things or talking to new people, that you can also, there's so much to explore and to learn, and there's so much truth by just staying home, by just getting to know you. And that kind of ties into this whole conversation we're having about archetypes and the archetypal wheel. It's like really learning about your own interior and learning about your emotional life, and spending time with your soul, and learning what's in your heart. These are all things that we do in the fourth house. And so the seeker actually could be quite comfortable here, in that way, once she realizes, I don't have to go out there and seek out in the external world. It's okay to stay here. And that I, I'm not selling myself short, that there's actually a whole rich inner landscape that to explore. And I'm just as likely to find truth in here as I am to find it out there. And that's what the seeker's really interested in, is finding truth. Yeah.
Within oneself. If it's in the fourth house.
Fourth house, it's within oneself. Now, if you were in an external house, which the top half of the wheel,
like the 11th or
the 7th through the 12th houses are
7th to the 12th,
are the more external houses. And so if it were in one of those houses, then it would be looking for truth out there. This is looking for truth in here. And so that's what happens, until we understand how how the archetype manifests in us, we kind of assume everybody else has the same experience of the archetype. So you might think somebody else who has the seeker is seeking for truth within, but they're actually seeking for truth through their career in the 10th house. So
that's why it's important to know which house it falls into.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. It really helps anyways to understand how it operates in you much better. Yeah.
Do we have time for one more, or should we go on to the next question?
I think it might be good to move on to the next one. Yeah. I think everybody got a little bit of a taster there, but we want to talk about some bigger world events.
So how can we use archetypes to become more aware and conscious in our current global condition? Because I know that a lot of people, their shadow side is probably stirred up during this tumultuous time. 2020 has been pretty crazy. And I know that the collective is a representation of the sum of each individual's consciousness. So, and I also read that Jung said that there exists a second psychic system of a collective universal type. And just getting a deeper understanding of this collective unconscious and how it relates to what is currently going on. Like, we can talk about some of the major events and what kind of archetypes they represent.
Yeah, so I think, you've definitely mentioned the it's good to, no matter which archetypes that you have or you're working with, it's really good to kind of do a health assessment on yourself and figure out, okay, which archetypes am I in the light with and that are really helping me out right now, and which ones are really in the shadow and being triggered, and how can I start to become more conscious of how that shadow is getting the best of me, and bring out more of the light, or move towards more of the light. And a lot of it is just awareness. It's just being able to watch it happen and have awareness of it. That's the first step. And then once you have awareness, oh, I'm totally procrastinating leaving the house today because I don't want to go out in the world because there's so much crazy stuff going on. Once you notice that saboteur in the shadow kind of driving your procrastination, that's the first step, is the awareness. And then you have the opportunity to make a choice. Okay, should I just stay home today? Is it just too much for me? Is the best thing just to stay home? Or is it good to push my comfort zone and go out today? Is it time for me to get going? So when you get to the point where you're making that conscious choice of how to work with the archetype, then you're in the power of it, or in the light of it. So that really helps as well. And it also helps you realize like that you're not a victim of it, right? That it's not running you, that you have some options here to co-create with it. Yeah.
Yeah, because whatever our thoughts, our emotions, they actually manifest in the collective consciousness, right? Which is why when we become more aware, we are in a way contributing to the collective consciousness.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I think that's one way you could see it, or another way is you're cleaning up. I think maybe a way Carolyn would describe it is you're cleaning up your own psychic field. So what happens when you're in the shadow is you're kind of shooting off, especially, if you're in the shadow victim and you're really upset about something, you're kind of shooting off all these little arrows or all these little psychic free radicals of negative energy, of bad thoughts that are contaminating the collective field. And so when you get clean about that and start to take care of yourself, do whatever self-care you need, and start to set good boundaries for yourself in terms of not letting those things pull you off your center, then you start to clean up you have better psychic hygiene, and you clean up your psychic field better so that you're
psychic hygiene.
You're not contaminating the field. Yeah.
Especially if you're an empath and you're someone who's really sensitive to energy.
Yeah, and that's another, I think we're all empaths, and
okay, but some more so than others, right?
I beg to differ with that one. I think some people are more aware of because to me, empathy is the same as intuition. We all have the ability to empathize with somebody else, and so it's just how conscious are you, how aware are you of what's going on. And so if you have if you're just kind of going through your day with blinders on, you're feeling all this stuff, but you don't know why you're feeling all this stuff. You're like, man, I feel kind of sick today. I feel kind of off today. Did I eat something wrong? You take it all very personally. You don't really realize that all this stuff is affecting you. But once you start to become more conscious or aware of what's going on all around you, and you start to kind of open your eyes to what's around you, then there can be this time where you feel really bombarded by a lot. And I think that's when people start to feel like they're an empath, but it's just they've taken the blinders off and they're seeing how we all have the capacity to see. And then it's, what do you do with that? How do you, okay, this has always been going on the whole time, but what is my relationship to it right now? Yeah.
Right.
And that's a whole another hour-long discussion.
That's a whole other hour. I mean, seriously, we could talk about this forever. But let's very quickly go over some of the major events that have happened this year, and the archetypes that they represent and what we can learn from it, basically. So should we start with the elephant in the room, COVID? Yeah,
right. That's pretty much, a global experience that we're all having. But and that's kind of it's really devastating. And it's also mind-boggling to think about that we're all having the same experience. It's an archetypal experience, ultimately. We're all really having the same experience at the same time. And this is new. Yeah. And this is new in that I think it's new in that we know we're having it at the same time. Now, there is a lot of historical evidence to show that similar ideas or similar experiences have arisen on different continents at the same time, even when the continents weren't talking to each other. One great example of this is shamanism, in that the shamanic practices, some ideas in shamanism arose on different continents.
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah,
I've heard about.
And so if you look back through the archaeological evidence, even though the different continents weren't communicating with each other because there wasn't that kind of travel yet, they still had the same ideas about astral travel or travel into the spirit world. They still had the same ideas. Yeah. And these ideas arise independently, but at the same time, those are archetypal. But for us to have this experience where we're all having the same experience at the same time, and we're all aware of it, that we're all having it together, I think that's new with this. Anyways, so there's a couple different archetypes that I think of, especially here in the US. And I see it happening in other countries. I try to kind of keep up, on somewhat on international affairs, and seeing there's big protests going on in Rome and Italy because they're locking down again, and people are really upset about that.
France too. France and the UK, they're all having they've announced lockdowns this week. Yeah.
And there's resistance to that. And here in the US, there's definitely
I can understand. People are frustrated.
There's definitely resistance to that here as well. And then the whole mask, do I wear a mask? Do I not wear a mask here? And so there's definitely some pushback to the government going on from a lot of people, and that's very much the rebel archetype coming through. And it's the rebel, sometimes in the shadow, in terms of like, I'm just going to push back because I don't want anybody to tell me what to do. The rebel in the shadow can't stand being told what to do. And really has a problem with authority figures. So the big government is a problem for the rebel. In the light, the rebel really helps break convention. So there are times when the way we've always done things is not a good way to always do things. And so the rebel can come in and question that and help us break that and get out of the cycle of what's not working and move into what does. So there is definitely a light side to that. But right now, unfortunately, we're probably seeing more of the shadow, in that it's just causing a lot of conflict, and sometimes just for the sake of conflict. Like, people are just getting into fights for the sake of fighting. It's really, unfortunate.
And then there's also the frontline workers, right? The medical.
So we're seeing a huge surge in the caregiver archetype. And I just did a big class on that, released it in the last couple of months on the nurturers, and the mother is the caregiver, and the companion.
And martyr too. Don't you think a bit of martyr is there? Because a lot of them are sacrificing and putting themselves in danger to help.
The martyr is, and so the caregiver is definitely, I think it's obvious to a lot of people in terms of giving. There's a big emphasis there on giving, and in the light, the caregiver learns to receive as well, to be the served as well as the servant. So that's an important aspect of this caregiver, and that's what people are learning, because this is such a long haul that we're on with the coronavirus and with COVID. The caregivers have to take care of themselves, or they are burning out and they're not going to make it. So that's a really important aspect. But the martyr is an interesting one, because there is, we think about martyrdom, and there is that with the shadow of, sacrificing oneself and saying, oh, poor me, putting oneself in the line of danger to get attention or pity. And so that there is that there, but there's also another layer with the martyr that I don't want to miss, that has to do with the divine. It is actually, Carolyn's defined different families of archetypes, and the martyr is in the divine family. So there is an aspect of feeling called to the work as sacred service. The martyr has to do with sacrifice, and what is sacrifice but an offering? It's you're offering yourself up. And so when I go to an altar and I make an offering, that is a divine sacred act. And the martyr is giving herself as the offering and understands it as such in the light. So there is a kind of elevated expression of the martyr. And so if somebody's looking at the martyr for themselves, they really need to understand that there's this divine aspect of it, that there is definitely a spiritual connection with the martyr. That's really important, that you have to see there. It's not just about, oh, poor me, I do everything for the family and I sacrifice everything. And it's also knowing that there's this light aspect.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Thanks for clarifying that. Should we do two more very quickly? Black Lives Matter.
So the big archetype that comes to mind for me looking at the Black Lives Matter movement is the liberator. It's a really, really big one. So liberator is very much about drawing attention to oppressed people and helping free them from oppression. And in this case, we are looking at systemic racism as what we're trying to overcome. and to free people from. And there is definitely an aspect of the liberator. One of the themes that comes in is that there is a time when the oppression is, there's a couple of key figures that the oppression is made obvious through. So with Nelson Mandela, for example, he was imprisoned for so long, and the entire international community was up in arms about it, and that's what got him out of prison. But he wouldn't leave prison until all of his colleagues that had also been persecuted were released first. You know, so he had a lot of integrity around that. But here we see all of the, you know, say their names: Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, you know, so those are the people that have really, the loss of their lives has brought the necessary attention.
Yeah, I also the wounded child, because I feel like it triggered a lot of the Black community, rightly so, because there's a history of it, right?
Yeah.
So is it safe to say that a little bit of that one of the archetypes could be the wounded child? I don't know. I don't know if I'm going in the right direction here, but
I don't know if I would. It's interesting, you know, because it's like, it's ancestral. We're looking at it in an ancestral level. So people,
tribal, right? We're going at the tribal level.
Yeah, we're going at a tribal or ancestral level. So you could have had a good childhood and had it, because the wounded child, I think a lot of people see that as a family issue, which is, you know, depends where it lands in your chart. But what we're looking at is something that's coming through on a generational, that's been inherited. It is coming down on a generational level. So, I mean, something we could borrow from the wounded child that would be helpful is the aspects of forgiveness. And there's the aspect of, you know, I just really think, though, with the liberator, what we're looking at in the light aspect is so it's kind of, what happens is the liberator, once they get things changed, once the laws get changed, once you get the oppressors out of their government seats, and now you have the oppressed, the people who were downtrodden, now they are in power. What are they going to do with that power? And so that's the piece where, are you going to bring in retributive justice, like the Nuremberg trials in Germany, or are you going to bring in restorative justice, like what happened with the Truth and Reconciliation Council in South Africa? So that aspect of forgiveness, but also we've been talking a lot in this country about reparations, about paying families, you know, ancestors or descendants, excuse me, of slaves, to try and give reparations for what's happened through the generations. And that's part of restorative justice. Those kind of conversations are restorative justice conversations versus let's go put the people who wronged us in jail. So that's an important aspect. That's a difference for the liberator between becoming a tyrant in the shadow, or helping the ideals that you're fighting for reign and breaking that cycle of oppression. Because
like peaceful protests, for protest, as opposed to violent ones.
Because what can happen is, and that's the question with the liberator too. I mean, Nelson Mandela struggled with this. He eventually went to the side of, we need to bring in violence because we're not getting heard. You know, I'm not here to judge which is the right way, but that's part of the struggle of the liberator, is where is that line? Do we go completely with nonviolence, or is there some level of violence needed to get attention? But how do we do it in a way that's not just going to perpetuate the cycle of oppression and violence that's already there? Yeah.
Okay. So let's bring this home with what's on everyone's mind today, at least in the United States, but I'm pretty sure everyone else in the world thinking about it, the 2020 elections.
Yeah, yes. It's,
what? We're not gonna be, I mean, we don't want to open a can of worms here, but very quickly, which archetype?
I'm not gonna say who I voted for. We'll just say that.
Don't.
Yeah, so the main archetype that comes to mind actually is the gossip archetype.
Oh yes.
Yeah,
but that's more the media, right?
The media.
Or
yep.
Yeah.
That is, it's such a focal point. I mean, because we've already talked about the pandemic, which is part of the focal point of and Black Lives Matter. And so that's big talking points in the election. But really, so much of the election is what's going on with the media and all of these conversations in the media and fake news and conspiracy theories. It's another big thing, is the conspiracy theories that are going on. And all of this is just a playground for the gossip archetype. So most people hear about the gossip archetype and they think shadow, right? They think sharing secrets, spreading false information, fake news, conspiracy theories. And yes, that is absolutely the gossip. It's like that sensationalized, how much attention can I get with what I share? Yeah.
Which is why they have fact checkers this year.
Yes.
And this election, which I think is so smart.
Right. Yeah. And how many people believe the fact checkers though, right? And so this is where the key aspect of the gossip comes in, is in terms of trustworthiness. So in the shadow, the gossip, you can't trust her. You can't tell her anything. She's going to go tell everybody else. Or she's making up sensationalized stories to get attention and spreading fake news about other people. But in the light, she's very trustworthy. And so that's the problem. That's the crisis our country is having right now, is that nobody knows who to trust anymore. Nobody knows what information to trust on social media, on the TV, any platform. It's because anybody can say anything they want, and there's no agreed upon reality right now. And so that's why we really need the light side of the gossip in terms of trustworthiness. Yeah. And there could be some element of the detective going on here too, in terms of like, how do you find out what the truth is? And so each of us could use a good detective in the light, doing the research, following the clues, and really trying to figure out what's the truth here.
And using your intuition.
Yes, yes. And the detective has a good gut instinct. The detective, when she's interviewing somebody or interrogating somebody or searching through evidence or following a trail, she's using her gut. She's using her intuition to figure out what's true here. And so I think that's a really important one at this time. But also, so we were talking about kind of clearing up your psychic field, really looking at your own relationship with the gossip. If that word triggers you, that's your first clue that that it's good. It would be a good idea to spend some time with this archetype.
Take a look at it.
Yeah. And really, like, where are you not holding other people's confidences? So somebody told you something and you told it to somebody else, and somehow you justified that was okay, right? So this is, how can you clean up your own behavior with the gossip and be a trustworthy person? And also sharing good news, right? Sharing the truth, getting information out there that needs to be out there, that is the truth. So this is all important because we're all working with the gossip right now on social media, and the networker is another one too. The gossip and the networker, a lot of people kind of get those two confused because there's some overlap. But the gossip has to do with trustworthiness, where the networker is just sharing information. There's just that that connectivity that's really important for the networker.
Yeah. Okay, let's hope for a good outcome, whatever happens.
Peaceful would be good. Yeah.
Peaceful would be nice. Let's move towards the light, no matter what happens.
Yeah.
Okay, Stacey, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here and sharing all your wisdom and helping us move towards the light. I feel like we really need that during these crazy times. And thank you to everyone who made the time to be with us today. If you're interested in learning more about Stacey, please visit her website, wildgratitude.com. She has amazing resources out there where you can learn more about everything that we talked about during this session.
Yeah, I've got a whole library of archetypes on there, and then a number of online classes too. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, Carolyn Mace's book, Sacred Contract.
Yep. And she has a whole online course. I'll give her a plug too. She has a whole online course in sacred contracts. So you can actually learn how to cast these charts and other charts. You can learn how to do this professionally as well and have an opportunity to be certified.
Get a certification, right?
Yep. So it's a really great program. I help run the program, so you would get to interact with me more if you sign up. So yeah.
Exciting. Guys, I really recommend it because you just you learn so much about yourself and you just become so much more conscious, and life becomes just more beautiful when you have this awareness. Okay, so we're going to end
it's just fascinating. Yep.
It's fascinating too. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to end on that note. Stacey, thanks again, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Yeah, thank you, Seline. Yeah, it's really good to see you, and thank you everyone for watching. Yeah.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.